Hello, I've come to talk to you about books, like some kind of woke Tai Lopez. I read a lot of books this year, but relatively speaking, I read more books this year than I've read in my entire life combined, I would imagine. Books before this include the Halo book, the Homefront book, the Dead Island book, and to prove to you that this is real, I don't remember anything about this book. I didn't get into books this year because I thought it would make me smarter or because it was healthy for me, but because I was getting bored of video games. And so, books it was. I tried to read a book a month, I failed, and then I didn't cry about it, at least. However, of the books that I read this year, I enjoyed most of them. I thought a lot of them were really good. I would like to read more books next year. However, as someone who is afflicted with the curse of being branded as gamer, I only know how to present my opinions in two forms. Reviews in which I get angry, or part two, the tier list. Alright, let's start out with a couple of DNFs. This is How You Lose the Time War. I have heard that this book is very, very good. I found it to be a little bit too lyrical for me. It's written in a way that is kind of adjacent to like poetry almost. And so not going into that ready for it to be that kind of way, I didn't vibe with it. I don't know if it's good or like if I think it's bad. It's relatively short, and so I will come back to it probably in February, and then I don't know, probably won't talk about it again next year. Who'd fucking knows? Next up, The Cellist of Savagiro. I think this book is probably going to be really good. I just wasn't vibing with it at the time. It is based on the Baltic War, or like the Siege of Sarajevo, which is like it was a siege in 1992. It's a fictionalized version of the citizens inside of that siege. But it's, from what I read, it was pretty harrowing. But at the time, it just wasn't really what I was looking for. And so this is another one where it's like, I'm going to go back to it, but I didn't finish it. And last up on the DNFs, No Country for Old Men. I didn't like it. We had this as a book club book between me and a couple of mates. And I want to say about a third of the way in, and it just didn't grip me at all. I had no attachment to any of the characters in like a thriller kind of manhunt style book. I don't know if I don't like the way that Cormac McCarthy writes, or if it's just a case of this was a thriller that didn't grip me, and so I didn't appreciate how Cormac McCarthy writes. Just not for me. This is one that I won't be going back to or trying to finish. But it off. Onto books I actually read. First book that I read this year was The Handmaid's Tale. I started out with the best book that I read all year. This book is fan-fucking-tastic. It's a kind of sci-fi based in a authoritarian takeover of America. And it follows the life of a woman inside of this regime. Basically, she's been like reduced down to like a vessel that can give birth for like an older generation. And so all of that could lead to a book that is very like overtly oppressive, really like heavy-handed. But I found that The Handmaid's Tale was kind of dystopian in like a Roadside Picnic kind of way, where it's not particularly subtle, but it is very mundane in its misery. And like, I don't mean that in like a derogatory sense. It's more that like the characters are so downtrodden, but this is just daily life. Margaret Atwood does just a fantastic job at developing suspense without kind of making it feel like you are standing at the edge of like a stage play. It's not particularly subtle, but it is very reserved in the way that it portrays oppressive, dismal misery under authoritarian regime. Absolutely fantastic. Would very, very, very highly recommend. Let's go up here. The Goat. If you are curious, I haven't read The Testament, and I have not watched the TV show of this either. And I probably don't intend to watch the TV show. Yup. Oh, one of the other things. Because the, like, misery and the downtrodden nature of it is so mundane, the moments where it goes from this is an oppressive, boring kind of life to, oh god, what the fuck is that? That's fucked, is really pronounced in a way that keeps the tone, but without throwing away that kind of idea that this is just life. Incredible, incredible book. Highly recommend. Roadside Picnic. If you have heard of this before and you are kind of like, why do I know this? It is the book that the film is based off of, that Stalker is based off of. It's Stalker. It's kind of hard to judge how much I enjoyed this by itself because I went into it with the context of Stalker, the video game. And so that kind of like clouded my perspective on Roadside Picnic. One of my mates who read this alongside me said that he didn't really enjoy it that much. The other guys, they said like, one of them said it was really good and one of them said it was all right. I thought it was fantastic. It is a Soviet sci-fi kind of like treasure hunt almost. It's got the same kind of like tonal qualities that I really liked about The Handmaid's Tale, but it's got like an element of mysticism, kind of like just kind of creeping at the edges of its storytelling. Like for example, like there are corpses that are just reanimated, but it's not treated as like a kind of like unusual kind of drama. It's just a part of life now. The environment that the book is set in is very much like Soviet brutalism as its kind of imagery and Soviet like rural environments, or at least that's kind of what I got from it. Again, like part of the struggle in quantifying how much I enjoyed this is kind of wrapped around the fact that I have some pre-existing imagery being brought in from the Stalker games. However, still really enjoyed it, really good. It does have like some really huge pacing problems. It just kind of goes on and on and on and on and on without a clear breaking point because of how the story is formatted. But beyond that, I thought it was really, really good. It was at times a little bit dry, especially towards the second act, I want to say, but I still really enjoyed it. It's still like way up my alley. If you have recommendations that are kind of like this, I would be very much on board. Where did the pen go? All right, since we did a book that I liked, and we still have a couple of books to go, let's do a book that I really fucking didn't, but I didn't dislike it a lot when I was reading it. Norwegian Wood. Now, I've read a couple of Murakami books before. I've read Colorless Tsukuru Tazaki and Kafka on the Shore. I really liked Colorless Tsukuru Tazaki. I liked Kafka on the Shore. So know that this is not a I hate Murakami, but my god, I hate this book. This book sucks. Do not read it. It is fucking terrible. Okay, it's not fucking terrible. Murakami still has like a very present sense of how to create a scene. You are able to kind of immerse yourself in the imagery, but he is absolutely incapable of writing female characters. And this isn't just an issue of like, oh, Murakami is writing a book about a guy who's in college, and so from his perspective, maybe he sees like women as objects. He just has every single character that is a woman be like a sex object at some point in this book. And like, you could make the argument that that is the perspective of the character, but it's just like the scenarios are so wildishly fucking stupid that it drove me insane reflecting on this book. The ending basically, like, it doesn't come out of nowhere. There's like a nice build towards like this sense that you are maybe like losing somebody in the story that the other character loves, but like the ending kind of just happens, which is fine because there's an element of the character is about to lose something in their life that is really important, but life goes on. And that's you know, that's pretty interesting, and I like the way that like loss is presented as a kind of like natural step within what goes on in his life. But then it's just like, it's followed by the worst reflection scene of all fucking time. It's just, it is a book that you could pin every single flaw onto the main character is flawed. However, the way that it is written feels more like Murakami in what, like I want to say this is like 1987, something like that, is just absolutely fucking awful at writing characters. 1960s pop? Whenever this was written, Murakami was not very good at writing characters. He's much better now. Colorless Sakura Tazaki was a much better book. Don't fucking read that. Go and read Colorless Sakura Tazaki. Like, both of those books are a coming of age, but one of them is presented, A, much better, and B, Colorless Sakura Tazaki is slightly beyond college. It's like a coming of age that is at a more interesting point in people's lives, in my opinion. Speaking of Japanese literature, Meiko Kawakami's Heaven. Now, a lot of people really, really like this book. I think that it's okay. It's about a Japanese student who is being bullied in school, and there's also another student there who's being bullied in school. And, you know, maybe there are elements of this in which there is like a cultural disconnect, like English culture and schools is maybe a little bit different. But while this is a really interesting exploration of what it means to be flawed and where our flaws dictate who we are, or like how much of us ourselves is defined by our flaws, which is a really interesting question. That question is interesting and like inherently creates like a story that is kind of driven by the misery, and it's really well written. Don't get me wrong, like there is a very present, raw, emotional tone to like every single chapter. It's fantastic in that sense. However, the book has such a persistence on misery that it becomes like comical by the end. By the end of the book, there is a scene that is so far-fetched in its misery that I couldn't just not read it and go, this is fucking stupid. It's not just that like, oh, this wouldn't happen. It's just like, this is a deranged thing for the character to do, even with the context of like what is going on. It just reflects a misery in a way that is too heavy-handed for me to enjoy. And so while I liked the majority of this book, it just wasn't for me, to be honest. Like, would I recommend it to other people? 50-50. But would I ever reread it? Absolutely not. Not even slightly. Oh, speaking of fucking stupid. Oh my good god. Dude. The Fault in Our Stars. I quite liked the characters that John Green creates in this book. You know, Hazel Grace is an edgy but charismatic teenage girl. And Augustus, whatever the fuck his name, Augustus Waters, is also a comically jockey, kind of kind character that seems like he's walked straight out of American Pie. But the characters are still fun. The characters are enjoyable. I liked reading them, even if there are times in which John Green captures the voice of a teenage girl to an annoying degree. The amount of times that is written in this is more than once, which is a crime in itself. However, there are so many situations in this book where I'm like, this is just fucking absurd to the point in which I cannot help but hate it. I want to directly read a quote for you, and I'm hoping that I can find the page relatively quickly. Basically, the context is they've just gone into like the Anne Frank house or something. It's some kind of Anne Frank like memorial style thing. So it's really like, oh fuck, this is quite serious. But they've just kissed inside of the Anne Frank house. There's a bunch of other context to this that is, you know, important but not that important. for what is about to be said. And they've just pulled away from kissing each other, and they're expecting everyone to be really mad. And then they started clapping. All the people, all these adults just started clapping. And one shouted, "Bravo," in a European accent. Fuck off, John Green. You're a fucking dickhead. I am not ashamed to say that I cried towards the end at dying children, but quite frankly, it's shit like that just makes it's just awful. I'm just not. I've heard that John Green has a couple of really good books, but that isn't one of them. That book fucking sucks. I will read Looking for Alaska and maybe enjoy that, but I hated that. I didn't hate it. I still enjoyed it, but like, I was laughing at it at several points during it. Ugh. Oh, I got to the end and just realized I haven't explained The Fault in Our Stars. The Fault in Our Stars is about someone who has cancer who falls in love. There we go. Also, they're a teenager. I want to avoid the sci-fi that I've read because there's a couple of good ones. All right, let's stay on books that I read that I didn't particularly enjoy, that I can't seem to find for some reason. I've been able to find everything else, whatever. Bullshit Jobs. Bullshit Jobs is a book that is very pertinent to what occupation is. It has a lot of fantastic ideas in there. However, it is a book that you kind of get the point of incredibly quickly, and is written in a way that I found very, very frustrating. It kind of felt like, I think the guy's name is David Grieber, is kind of up his own arse the whole time. And I'm sure that's not like how he meant to come across, but like that's how it felt when I was reading it. Basically, the idea is that there are a lot of white-collar jobs, specifically in America, but beyond America, like including inside of Europe, in Asia, all over the world, that are effectively meaningless jobs that make us miserable, that are just structures of power for people at the top of food chains to maintain like a financial dominance or like occupational dominance. And there are parts of the book that are really interesting in that discussion. More so the kind of like anecdotes from people that the author spoke to in order to develop the book. I think that there's like a smaller online essay. It wasn't the online essay, it was the book. And those like testimonies and those anecdotes, those are particularly interesting, but especially around the start of the book, the author just has a presentation style that is uniquely frustrating to read, in that it kind of feels like he's saying, "I told you so," when I agree with him. Does that kind of make any sense? There's a reason I don't write books, because I don't know what the fuck I'm talking about. I still enjoyed it for the concepts that it talks about and kind of the anecdotes and some of the details inside of like the concept, but it's a book that you kind of get the feel of pretty early and is written in a way that can kind of be frustrating the more and more that you read it. It was okay. It was okay. Would I rather read Norwegian Wood or The Fault in Our Stars again? Fuck no. I'd rather read Bullshit Jobs, and so it goes in okay. Sticking on non-fiction though, .com. It is a book that surrounds the .com bubble, specifically in regards to kind of the stock market around the time, the growth of the companies in the .com bubble, and it is written in, I believe, 2002, and that gives it a very, very interesting perspective. So because it's written in 2002, the dot-com bubble has burst by this point. It's like, the stocks have just absolutely decimated. However, there's a little bit of over-ambition from John Cassidy to say that the technology is like overhyped. Like, obviously from our perspective in 2025, we can see that the internet has changed everyone's lives. It has completely reformed industry, and e-commerce has like taken over entirely. This book is a fantastic dissection of the complete overambitiousness and the kind of greed in the IPOs from the companies around the time. However, makes a lot of misjudgments about the technology itself. And so between like all of this interesting kind of like dissection of the incentive structures within the stock market, you get things like I'm not going to be able to find it. There is a point in which he says that it would be ridiculous that Blockbuster would go out of business because of video over the internet. And it's like, you're 5 years off from, is it 5 years off? When did Blockbuster go out of business? Or when did it like scale down? But it's like, the book is just around the brink of the internet kind of like destroying a bunch of businesses. And there are times where it makes really bold assumptions that the internet could never replace like a mall retailer. It is very funny in that sense, but it is also extremely informative. There are times in which it is directly funny. I don't know if this is a great book if you have like no interest in the kind of topic, but as someone who is like mildly familiar with all of the things that go on within the book, I found that it kind of brought you through enough that even without like a really in-depth knowledge of the stock market or bonds or anything like that, or interest rates, you could still really, really enjoy it. Really, really great read. Fantastic. Really enjoyed it. Great. I don't know how good it would be to people that aren't me though. Yippee! Okay, I'm going to kind of breeze over this one because I'm not quite sure how to describe it. Small things like these is kind of like an Irish slice of life almost, but there is drama to do with the church and what was it called again? Magdalen laundries. I'm sure that I'm getting that wrong. There's a bunch of like instances in which Irish phonetics are a little bit different to English phonetics. But there's a little bit of drama in regards to like exploitation via the church. And it's this fiction that's kind of about like appreciating the things that you do have and trying to do your best for the people that you can help. And kind of like the tension between should you reserve the privilege that you have and make sure that that is safe, or take a risk that could benefit the lives of someone who is in need, especially for like a family that is in a position where they are not struggling, but they are inside of an environment in which they are potentially very soon to be struggling. And I thought that those are really interesting questions. I thought it was really well written, but it is maybe a little bit not like plain, but maybe a little bit engaging depending on what you're looking for. I really like this. I really like slice of life. I really like slow paced. Not a lot is going on. The tension is kind of, there's no like sense of immediate danger, that kind of thing. But there is still like a concept of stake and worth that is more introspective than it is immediate life or death. Although there is still like a concept of that inside of this book. I really liked it. It's just I kind of struggle to put what I like about it into words. Very good. I liked it. I wish I could say more about it, but I'm dense. If I suddenly look more haggard and tired, it's because it's a new day. The only book that I read this year that was a PDF was Inherit the Stars, and it was good. Apparently this is part of a trilogy, and I have no intention of reading the rest of the trilogy, to be fair, because while I like this, if there's more beyond this, I would imagine it gets into territory of science fiction that is humans communicating with aliens, like, physically, and that's not what I wanted. The concept of the book is that they, a bunch of guys, they're exploring the moon, they find a corpse on the moon, it is definitely not one of their people, and then it's nobody's people, and then they have to find out where this person has come from. It starts out a bit kind of dull and not necessarily dry, but it's just really, it's not in the weeds very much about like the concept of like what we leave behind and like what humanity's mission is, which it kind of like gets into later into the book. Excluding like the pacing, my biggest problem with it is that it has a tendency to kind of not necessarily jerk itself off, but it's like, it's definitely playing close to the fleshlight early on, as it's kind of like throwing out mumbo jumbo jargon that is just never like comes into play in any significant factor. And that kind of brings down how attached you get to the story, because it's throwing out words that kind of don't mean anything to you, and then they never develop a meaning, because the early on kind of concept of kind of this mechanical discovery of what is going on then gets thrown away in the second half for a much better story about the philosophy of like what it is to be alive and leave a legacy. It's pretty good. What is a society, man? It's a very big-brained book. But yeah, I liked it. Didn't love it. I liked it. Similarly to Inherit the Stars, but I liked it a lot more. Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep? I thought it was really, really good. You know, Blade Runner is based on it, but I haven't really like watched Blade Runner or like read. Is there other books on Blade Runner? I don't even know. And so I'm very like unfamiliar with that kind of like territory. However, from what I understand, it's very grungy. It's very And this was like funny, especially in like the first half. It was a really brisk, fun read that kind of like delves into like the line between what is technology and what is man, or the fucking sci-fi bullshit. In that kind of briskness, it does suffer in some ways, in that it very quickly will move on from concept to concept and mechanic and like character to character. And so while it's like a really enjoyable first half, there's like a portion towards the back where it just feels like you are sprinting through any kind of interesting discussion about what it means to be conscious and like what it means to have like connection to other people. It raises some interesting questions, but it doesn't stew. It doesn't kind of sit in itself long enough to be like, I'm tasty now. And so that like had me like it, but I didn't love it. We give that a like. And last, but definitely not least, the most recent book that I've read, the final book to round the year out probably, Flowers for Algernon. And this book was fucking incredible. It was fantastic. If I hadn't read The Handmaid's Tale, this would be my favorite book of the year. It's a sci-fi about a man who is mentally handicapped, who has a surgery that rapidly increases his intelligence. And it's like a sci-fi, but it's kind of like a grounded sci-fi in the sense of like Her, as opposed to Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep. Like excluding the surgery and like the concepts in science, it's like this is just life in the 1960s roughly. There's a short version and a long version. I read the long version, which isn't that long, as you can tell. It's like just an extension of a short story, and it goes into some really just like fun, well, okay, maybe not fun, it goes into like some really interesting points that I hadn't encountered in anything else that I'd read this year, like especially how like wider society treats people who are mentally handicapped, what our perception on like the way that people interact around us brings value to our lives, what it means to be a little mouse who's not trying to fuck while your owner is trying to fuck. And it's like written from this like first person perspective that like, I don't necessarily think that you have to do anything interesting with the mechanics of writing. Like, I don't think that a book like, what is it called? House of Leaves? Is that what it's called? I don't think a book like House of Leaves is necessarily that interesting to me, but even as someone who is kind of like a hater for those kind of things, Flowers for Algernon, in like the first like, I want to say about like 20 pages, it's like, it's written from the perspective of someone who cannot read and write very well, and so you have like really brief chapters, but though you're still given like an insight into who the character is, and as like you get further and further along, it's like elements of his like morphing personality traits are both like, you can feel them mechanically in the way that he's writing, and like also like the perspective that he brings to the world. I will say, if you read the long version, the blurb kind of, not the blurb, is this a blurb? What's the back called again? The back kind of like ruins the book, and because of that I'm not gonna like go into it, but it's like you have like a 2-sentence summary of like the story, but a very integral part of the story doesn't happen until like the final like 50 pages from the back of the book. And it's like, oh, and so I went into it like waiting for this very key story moment to happen, and it just wasn't coming. The main character, Charlie Gordon, is just incredibly well-rounded, both like pre-operation and post-operation, to the point where you are like incredibly invested in this character, so that like come the end of it, it's like, oh, if you know, you know. It's, oh my fuck, it's good. I don't necessarily like hold that much value in the ending. Where's the pen gone? I don't necessarily hold that much value in like the ending of like a piece of media in terms of like, did I enjoy the whole thing? For example, like Roadside Picnic. I didn't care for the ending of that book in the fucking slightest. I found a pen. And so that goes right along here, up the top. And those are all the books that I read this year. Do I think that you should read books? Like, yes, but not because it's like, oh, they'll make you smart. I think that's fucking stupid.
I read a book a day not to show off. It's, again, about the knowledge.
Especially if you're a gamer, though. I think that there are a lot of, like, game stories that aren't necessarily that interesting that are held up as, like, masterpieces. And that's not to say that, like, there aren't, like, good games that have good stories. Like, Outer Wilds, obviously. Fantastic game, fantastic story. You know, conventional literature, I think, has a lot more, not necessarily like novelty to the stories that are being written, but there's a bit more depth in what has been done successfully, since they aren't like bogged down by like mechanics that kind of imply that like you need to have fun with a game alongside it. Like, you know, parts of this and this can be like miserable and dreary and dull, but still engaging in a way that games currently like aren't. Read a book because it's like, oh, story's really good and like I want to explore what it's in a different medium. If you would like to see what I read in the future, I have a Goodreads account. I don't know why you would want to see that. I don't know why we do anything. Okay, that was my video. Bye-bye.